Do you think that the U.S. should pull out of NATO with all this talk with Russia and Ukraine and NATO or not NATO, and the Trump administration here recently has kind of gotten into a little bit of a pissing match with NATO as an organization, and do you have a take or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is a tough question, and I can see the current administration's frustration with it. When we're spending there's a lot of waste going on, and you got to remember that Trump is not a lawyer. Pretty much everyone else in D.C. that's an elected official is a lawyer. They've gone to school and been trained to think like a lawyer for 2 years at least. And then they go and get elected into office and whatnot. And that's dangerous because there's a really strong potential for groupthink there.
Yeah.
And he's not a lawyer, he's a businessman. Lawyers think very qualitatively. That's why Clinton said it depends what your definition of the word is. A businessman would never say that.
Yeah.
A businessman thinks quantitatively. Like, doesn't matter, 1 + 2 is always 3. Doesn't matter what you feel about it or anything else. So I think it's really good to have an approach to some of these issues, and and that's what the disruption is. That's a result of it. But the thing is about leadership is that it's not always fun. It's not always
popular.
No, yeah, and it's not always seemingly like you aren't always going to benefit from it. But it really depends how much leadership in this world we want to maintain and retain, I think. And so I just think it would be it's a good idea to stop and think, like, if we're giving up our own placement and access here. Now, granted, should those countries take on responsibility for their own security, etc.? Absolutely, they should. And I think the reason they lean on the U.S. so heavily is because, look, you got a bunch of countries that speak different languages, they have different equipment, they're different supply and logistics change. And war is about logistics. It's harder for them to do what we can do with our military more quickly and more seamlessly because we're the center of gravity.
Yeah.
And so I don't know about giving up placement and access in NATO and giving up that leadership role. I'm not sure that's a great idea for those reasons.
Yeah. I tend to agree. I would say I'll expand on it by saying I think it's an important question to ask because just asking that question forces all the other countries to rethink their involvement, our involvement, and how that relationship works. And I would take it a step further and say I think, instead of saying, hey, we should pull out of NATO, I think maybe a better or smarter approach, a more strategic approach, is to put the ball more in their court by saying, we will stay if, like we're happy to stay in this position, we want to stay in this position, but here are the boxes that need to be checked for us to do that, because the days of being steamrolled and whatever are done. I think that's probably the better way to look at it, because I do think it's a mutually beneficial relationship. There, NATO has plenty of fucking problems. Like, don't get that twisted. But I think it needs more leadership in NATO, and if not us, then who?
Yeah.
So I think it's just taking that approach is maybe a better way to do it. But
yeah, I would agree with that.